POV, you're sent to a Catholic school to be disciplined.
But the real lesson is learning who benefits from your obedience. St. Augustine Catholic Academy stood behind iron gates and stone walls,
The kind of place that looked holy from a distance and that parents trusted without asking questions. My parents said it would straighten me out through structure, morals, and God. I was 14 when I transferred there, stepping into a new uniform, new rules, and a new kind of silence. We prayed before class, we prayed after class, and we even prayed before punishment. Sister Margaret ran discipline. In her late 50s, with sharp eyes and a voice like cold marble, she believed obedience was love and love was compliance. We were taught early that questioning was dangerous, that humility meant accepting correction without explanation, and that suffering had spiritual value.
I learned to keep my head down, to walk in straight lines, and to speak only when spoken to. There was a boy named Thomas in my grade, always polite and always exhausted. He carried textbooks for teachers without being asked and stayed after school for detention he never seemed to earn.
Everyone called him devoted, but I called him tired. One afternoon, Sister Margaret accused him of disrespect because he hadn't bowed his head quickly enough during prayer.
He didn't argue. He apologized.
They gave him detention anyway. 2 hours of silent kneeling.
That night, I saw him limping as he walked to the bus.
He smiled when I asked if he was okay and said God was teaching him patience. That sentence stayed with me, not because it sounded faithful, but because it sounded rehearsed. Over time, I noticed patterns. The most obedient students were always the most exhausted, and the most praised were the most used. We cleaned classrooms, organized church events, and worked fundraisers. The school called it service, but it felt like labor. One day in theology class, Father Collins lectured about sin, temptation, and how discipline protected us from ourselves. He said authority was God's instrument and resistance was pride.
I raised my hand, my heart pounding, and asked why obedience was only demanded downward, why teachers were never questioned, and why punishment always came without explanation. The room went still. Father Collins smiled and said faith wasn't a debate club.
He said some truths weren't meant to be challenged.
After that, teachers watched me differently, like I had cracked something fragile.
Thomas stopped talking to me, not because he wanted to, but because he was warned. He told me quietly that Sister Margaret said doubt spreads like disease and diseases must be isolated.
Weeks later, Thomas fainted during morning mass, hitting the stone floor hard.
They blamed dehydration and weakness, but they never blamed the system.
While he recovered, his parents were told he needed even more spiritual guidance, more structure, and more discipline. I realized then that the school didn't protect children. It protected itself. The breaking point came during confession. Behind the screen in that controlled space, Father Collins asked about my thoughts, my doubts, and my attitude. I told him the truth, that I felt the school confused fear with faith and that obedience felt less like love and more like control. There was a pause before he said pride often disguises itself as conscience and requires correction. The next day, I was assigned mandatory service with extra hours and supervision. They said it was for my growth. During one long afternoon cleaning the chapel, I found Thomas sitting alone and crying quietly, ashamed of it.
He said he was tired of apologizing for existing and tired of feeling sinful for being human.
That was it. The next morning during assembly, Sister Margaret spoke about discipline, order, and submission. I stood up, my legs shaking, but my voice carried anyway. I said that faith without compassion was empty, that obedience without dignity was abuse, and that God didn't need children to be broken to be respected. There were gasps, whispers, and shock. Sister Margaret told me to sit down, but I didn't. I said the school taught silence better than truth and fear better than faith. They escorted me out politely but coldly.
My parents were furious, embarrassed, and afraid.
But something changed after that, slowly.
Thomas transferred out months later and wrote to me once, saying he slept better and that his prayers felt like conversations now.
Not confessions. Years later, I still believe in God, but not in institutions that demand submission without accountability.
The most important lesson Catholic school taught me wasn't theology.
It was this: faith should never require you to disappear, and obedience that destroys dignity is not holy. Sometimes the bravest prayer is standing up, even when the room tells you to kneel.